What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show here exclusively on our YouTube channel. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for free. Get consistent updates on the latest on Michigan recruiting as well as the team. Just hit that subscribe button and you'll get notifications every time we drop a new video. And liking this video helps with the engagement, helps get more people in the chat box. I see that a lot of people were here early. We've got a ton of questions. So if you want to skip the line, hit that little box with the dollar symbol. That's a super chat that allows you to move up into first place. And that money goes directly to our travel budget. Before we start answering tonight's questions, we do have a message from our sponsor, which is ourselves. We do produce a magazine, and we have a special commemorative edition of the Wolverine magazine available on the wolverineondemand.com. So head over to the wolverineondemand.com and get your commemorative edition honoring the 2024 national champions and the 2023 season. There's two versions of this magazine. One is a regular, soft cover magazine. It's 148 full color glossy pages. And there's also a book version, 144 ad-free pages, and that's actually a hardback cover. So a real book that you can throw on the coffee table. I have one, and it's definitely cool to have around. Both versions include in-depth features on Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy, and other stars from the championship, exclusive highlights on the dynamic defensive line, and the path to the championship, comprehensive game-by-game coverage, stunning photography, insightful column stats, and so much more. It's also a great gift idea. You can give it to a friend, get some for your family, and also obviously keep it for yourself to have on display. And it's going to be something you'll want to have to look back on. And also the Wolverine contributed 5% and is still contributing 5% of the pre-order sales to the Champions Circle NIL fund. And our team guys were just out there presenting the check to them. So yeah, we are all in support of Michigan athletics, and you guys can support us as well by getting your copy. All right, let's get into the questions. Like I said, we have a ton. So let's go ahead and start off with Butter XO. And he says, EJ, can you explain how the Elite 11 selection process works and how likely it will be for Carter Smith to get selected for the finals? So the Elite 11 selection process is kind of weird. Like, there's no real guidelines for it. Obviously, they hold regional competitions, and you have to compete in those in order to get an invitation to the finals. So Carter Smith just competed in the Orlando regional, and I thought he had a great performance. I thought he was the top 2025 quarterback there. I posted video with all his stats from each individual circuit he competed in within the event. And, like I said, I thought he did enough to earn an invitation to the finals. Now, they base their selection. Again, there's no true guidelines like, oh, I can pull up the guidelines here and tell you how they do it. But I know they base it off of the regional competitions as well as what they see on film. And so at this Orlando regional, they didn't send out any on-site invitations. They just had one in Columbus, Ohio. And I do not believe they sent out an on-site invitation either. And Michigan's quarterback signee from last cycle, Jaden Davis, competed in the Atlanta regional and did not get an on-site invitation. They do give out invitations later. It's called the Elite 11, but they invite more than 11 quarterbacks. I think it's 22, so they double the number. And then the top 11 finishers at the finals are named the Elite 11 for that class. So, for Carter, there isn't anything else he can do to be selected. He just kind of has to sit back and wait. But like I said, I thought he did enough, at the regional. And obviously his film is very impressive. He's the Gatorade Player of the Year. And obviously he's also not very, not super polished as a quarterback, or not as polished of a passer as a Jaden Davis was, who grew up with quarterback coaches. But I think that, Carter is really developing as a pure passer. And, on tape, it's easy to see what makes him special. And that's his ability to run, his playmaking ability in and around the pocket. And like I said, he's getting better as a passer. He's working with Coach Hewlett up in Jacksonville, who's Brock Purdy's quarterback trainer, and you could see a significant progress. Like I saw Carter in the fall, and then I saw him again in January, and then seeing him again here in April, you see the progression that's going on for him as a pure passer. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to like about Carter, whether he gets the Elite 11 invite or not. I think he's one of the more fascinating quarterback prospects in the country, and definitely has a super high ceiling. Let's go to John A. Schultz, and he says, EJ, did Nathaniel Marshall pass the EJ height test? I heard he was shorter than his listed height and that his future might be inside instead of as an edge. So, yeah, Marshall's listed as a defensive lineman. Michigan has been recruiting him more as an edge prospect. And, like I mentioned in my evaluation of him, I think he's more of a tweener type prospect. The things I really love about Nathaniel Marshall, one is the athleticism. I mean, that athleticism pops out on tape right away. He is, a guy that's a high level basketball player. He has an uncle that played in the NBA. His mother played Division I basketball, and you can see that he is just that type of twitchy athlete. His get off is super, super impressive as well. Just tremendous first step. He's a guy that can wreak havoc when he has his hand in the dirt. He does play a lot of nose, I'm assuming out of necessity. And so he can be a disruptive force at the high school level. And he's really tough to block at that level just because he's so much bigger, faster, and more athletic than those guys. As a pure pass rusher, there isn't a lot of, film of him doing that. And the thing that I don't like about Nathaniel Marshall is his build. And so to answer your question, no, he did not pass the height test. I went and I saw him in the fall, and he's definitely a lot closer to 6'4", maybe. I don't think he's 6'5" at all. And he has a really compact build. He has a thick lower half, and he's not a really long guy like a Devin Baxter or Luger Pai from last cycle. So, like I said, he's a tweener. He could go the route of Derek Moore, who at the time looked like a bit of a tweener, or he could add a lot of weight and be a 4-eye and follow maybe a similar path as Chris Jenkins. Remember, Chris Jenkins was listed as an edge as a recruit by some services, and he only weighed like 240 before he ballooned up to 300 or whatever Chris ended up being. So with Nate Marshall, I think he has two different ways to go. I'm just not sure which way he will go. Like I said, the athleticism and the get off and the first step, like it's all great. I just don't know exactly what he'll be in this scheme. So it'll definitely be interesting. I could see him going either that Jenkins route or the Moore route. John A. Schultz back with another one. He says, EJ, how does Marquise Davis compare to Donovan Edwards when he was a prospect? People seem to think he'd fit that role, but Davis's angry running style makes me think he'd be a better bell cow than Dono. I think people forget that Donovan, like if you go back and watch Donovan's high school tape, he does run angry. He runs people over. One of my favorite memories of Donovan Edwards is the West Bloomfield playoff game against Belleville. And that was a super epic game. It went into overtime. And I remember Donovan running over former commit Miles Rouser, just completely just running him over. It was hilarious to watch and scoring the game-winning touchdown. And at the time, Belleville was super hated because of Crowell and his comments about Michigan. And West Bloomfield was kind of like the darling team led by Ron Bellamy, who's obviously now on staff at Michigan. And so it was a fun game. I mean, that's one of my favorite high school games, like top 5 I've ever been to. But Donovan ran people, point being that Donovan ran people over at the high school level. And, I think you'll see more between the tackles type running from Donovan this season now that it's kind of his show. But Marquise kind of embodies a lot of what I saw from Donovan as a high school player. I don't think, Donovan had this gigantic personality, and yeah, he had a gigantic personality and he played that way as well. Sorry, guys, I got distracted. My wife left her phone at home, so she's annoying me during the show. But anyway, yeah, no, I feel like Donovan's flashy style is kind of similar to Marquise, but different at the same time. Because Donovan had such a magnetic personality, it translated into his game. With Marquise, he's not this big talker guy. He's not a magnetic guy. He's more quiet. But his flashy play is definitely there in terms of how explosive he is, how dynamic of a runner he is, what he can do as a pure athlete. Remember, some schools thought he was a Division I player on the defensive side of the ball, but I think you can put him in the slot, split him out wide, have him catch passes out of the backfield, and he can be that between the tackles runner as well. I mean, you're talking about a guy that was named the Gatorade Player of the Year as a junior in the state of Ohio, beating out Jordan Marshall for that award. And you're also talking about a guy that rushed for more than 2,200 yards in, one of the better high school football playing states in America. So, I mean, I love Marquise. I think he should be ranked in the same area that Donovan was. And, if you remember, Donovan was right on kind of that cusp of 5-star status. And that's where I see Marquise Davis. And with Donovan, junior year, a lot of people don't remember this, but I wasn't super sold on Donovan when he was a junior. It wasn't until the offseason going into his senior year that I saw significant progress and was like, oh man, this guy's definitely going to be a stud. And then by this time his senior year came on, I was completely sold on Donovan, and obviously I was super high on him. With Marquise, I'm already sold on him as a junior. Like, I think he's that good. I think he's Donovan-esque. And like I said, I had Donovan by the end of his senior year ranked in that, kind of 5-star area. I already have Marquise there. I think he's that good. Johnny Schultz back with another one. He says, EJ, why do you think baseball is the best other sport to judge football prospects with? Why not judge positionally, like defensive tackle, wrestling, wide receiver, track, tight end, hoops? Yeah, I mean, I think all of those things translate for sure. When you look at wide receivers, you look at 100-meter times all the time, but there are some guys that have great 100-meter times that can't catch the football and can't run routes. There's some really athletic tight ends that play basketball, and when they put on a helmet, they're afraid to block. So I think baseball is a good sport-to-sport translation for a lot of different reasons. One, it's a very it's very hand-eye coordination driven. There's a lot of short area bursts that you have to do. Just spatial awareness, being aware of where you are in the field, obviously. And just things like bending and flexibility and athleticism, a lot of stretching if you've ever played baseball. But yeah, I always sucked at baseball. So I always have respect for people that can play baseball. Like, it takes a certain type of athlete to be able to do that. And you see more translation across different positions. It's not just position driven, like you're saying, maybe, with track and wide receiver and DBs. Obviously we use the 100 a lot for DBs as well. But I think, like I said, baseball is just kind of all around. Anytime I see a guy that is super high level at baseball, regardless of position, I get more excited because it tells me that they're disciplined. It tells me they have great hand-eye coordination. It tells me that they work on flexibility and short area quickness a lot. Like I said, they have the spatial awareness, and baseball is a really disciplined sport. It's a mental game as well. So I think, again, I'm not a baseball guy. I hate baseball, but the translation is certainly there across all positions. That's why I was, and I can name several players at different positions. This cycle, Marco Jones, who just visited, is an edge, who's a really high-level baseball player. I'm really excited about him. Taylor Tatum last cycle at running back was a very high-level baseball player. Like, I'm talking MLB caliber players. Carter Smith this cycle is an MLB caliber player. And so, again, a lot of those skills just translate. So that's why I like to use baseball as a reference. I just think, it gives you that kind of extra edge in some certain areas that translate well to the football field. EJ, Avery Gash has a set decision date. Should Michigan fans take this as good news that he isn't taking his OVs, or should we be worried? No, our Zach Libby was actually out at Birmingham Groves today watching Avery Gash run the 100 meter. Not sure how that translates, but it's fun. No, I mean, I think Michigan is in a great spot here going into his decision date, which is locked in for May 3rd. The Wolverines have checked all the boxes for him throughout the offseason. He made 3 visits this spring, including over the weekend for the spring game. And I think, Michigan obviously has the offensive line production to sell. He has a great relationship with head coach Sherrone, who served as his primary recruiter before he was promoted to head coach. Grant Newsome's done a fantastic job of building that bond with him. He already, knows some of the players on the team, even got to go to class with Blake Frazier on one of these visits. So, I think he just identifies with everything, Michigan related, and he sees himself as a perfect fit. The other schools that made his top group, Ohio State, Michigan State, and Wisconsin, I don't really see any of them as major threats here. There hasn't been much buzz with Ohio State lately. He is a Michigan State legacy, but again, I mean, Michigan's the superior program and no real reason to worry there. And then Wisconsin, I haven't even heard Wisconsin in this recruitment at all. So, yeah, I'm not worried. Michigan fans shouldn't be worried. I think this is still trending Michigan's way. I've had a prediction in since November, so I know you've seen some new predictions come in for him. I didn't put one in because I already had one in. I was the first one to put one in, like I said, way back in November. So, yeah, I still feel really confident in that. Tyson Smith says, will Nate Marshall drop in the rankings now that he is committed to Michigan? I don't know why you guys like to do that, man. Like, the guy that does the On3 rankings, Charles Power, he doesn't hate Michigan, and I've criticized some of Charles's rankings too. It's not like it's not like I'm like Charles's rankings are amazing. There have been some rankings I've been critical of, and he doesn't just drop guys because he wants to drop them. He has his own reasons, and it's subjective, right? Rankings are subjective, but in fact, it would make more sense for On3 to rank all of Michigan's commits super high because we're like the biggest site on the network. So it would be pleasing like your biggest fan base. So, I think Charles does a good job of keeping it impartial. He's not a fan of any one team. So that's good. Kind of like me when I'm reporting, I'm not a fan. So it helps. I think, I talked about Nate Marshall earlier in the video. I think that with Nate, he's just a bit of a tweener, and that's why I have him graded a little bit lower than the industry. Like, everybody has him consensus top 100, with most sites having him in the 70s. I have him like in the top 125 to 175 range. And that's mostly because I'm having a very difficult time projecting him. And I explained my reasoning earlier in the show, but I don't think he'll drop just because he committed to Michigan. I feel like that's such a big myth. Like, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes recruits are ranked too high to begin with because the rankings process starts early and earlier. Like, I just saw Rivals, for example, they just released, their 26 rankings. On3 had done that months before them. So it's just getting an early start. And sometimes it's tough to project high school sophomores. I talked endlessly about Jaden Davis being ranked as high as he was last cycle, and then how he kind of maxed out and got passed up by his peers, at least for the high school level. And so, yeah, it just happens. It's not because they commit to Michigan, but I do think Marshall is a guy that could drop, but it won't be because of the commitment. Tyson Smith says, "What's your ranking of Avery Gash?" This is another one, man. Why do you guys pick guys that I'm not like overly enthused about? Gash is ranked as a 4-star across the board, and 2 services have him in the top 200. ESPN has him just inside the top 300 at 296. And On3 has him as a 3-star. I thought they had him a 4-star. On3 has him as a 3-star. So they have him ranked way back there. I think that I disagree with everyone. I have Avery Gash as actually, I agree with ESPN because I have him as a borderline top 300 4-star type kid. I do think he's one of the better interior offensive linemen in the country. The problem with me is I don't value straight up interior guys that don't have much tackle flexibility as much as maybe other services do. And with Avery Gash, I see him solely as an interior offensive lineman. I think he's a guard all the way. I don't think there's any room for movement with him. With that said, I think it should be noted that I like Avery Gash more than a lot of the other interior offensive linemen that were on the board that have, recently kind of dropped off. So, I'm talking about guys like Rowan Byrne, John Mills, Logan Powell. I have Avery Gash ahead of all of those guys. So, the biggest thing with Avery is I just see him, as a guard, and I don't value that position as much when doing my own personal rankings, but I think he is one of the better interior offensive linemen in the country. And so, like I said, I have him in that, low 4-star, borderline top 300, similar to ESPN's ranking there. Tyson Smith says, Hayden Bradley named Michigan in his top 5. Will we get him? No, I don't think so. I mean, he did visit Michigan, but it seems Ole Miss has the heavy lead on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. South Carolina has gained some buzz lately. Like I said, Michigan hosted him for a visit this spring, but don't see much movement there. Tyson Smith's last question is, what was your first job? My first job as a recruiting reporter was being an intern for Rivals. My first job, and the only job I've had that's not been in the journalism type field, was I was a barista at a hotel Starbucks. So a lot of people think I'm from Dallas, which I rep all the time, obviously. And I spent my adult life there for the most part, but I actually grew up in a tourist town called South Padre Island, Texas, which is on the Mexico border. And so it was just tourist palooza, and I was a barista in a hotel Starbucks, and I hated it. You had to wake up early. The people are always mean because they're like rich tourists, and it's Starbucks, and people are just angry in general. You smell like coffee. It sucks. And at the time, we had to like bake our own cookies. And one day I just had enough of it. And the manager at the time, named David, came over and was like, "You're not making enough cookies." And I just threw a tray of cookies at him, and then I left, and obviously I got fired. So that was my only other job. Let's go with John A. Schultz. And he says, any news on Marcus Wimberly? Actually, John, I don't know if you missed it, but Marcus Wimberly committed to Oklahoma. I don't think there will be much of a chance of Michigan flipping him there. And I think everybody's going in a different direction. Jeff M. says, I hope I'm wrong, but I see a quarterback on Michigan. I don't see a quarterback on Michigan's 2024 roster capable of leading Michigan to a Big Ten title. How early in Carter Smith's Michigan career will he have a good chance to be the starter? Yeah, I mean, with Carter, it's all about how he progresses as a passer. I mean, he's a dynamic athlete. He's a special playmaker, just, again, in and around the pocket. But he's also kind of unlike JJ. He's a guy you can design runs for. I said his game's a little similar to Taysom Hill when Taysom was at BYU and was an actual quarterback. So I think that comparison is one I would use, though Carter has a slightly different build than Taysom. But the playmaking ability of JJ is certainly there. And that complements a guy like Jaden Davis, who's just a high floor, accurate short to intermediate passer that can make the occasional high level throw. I thought he had that good throw to whoever that walk-on receiver was in the spring game that Jair Hill broke up. So he can occasionally make that throw, and he's very good short to intermediate. So you could see maybe like a Cade McNamara, JJ McCarthy type situation where Jaden is just the high level game manager, and Carter Smith's that really interesting dynamic athlete waiting in the wings. But I think it'll take a little bit for him to come along as a passer. But that quarterback situation will definitely be interesting. Let's go ahead and go down to Borge Warner, and he says, are we going after some more big-bodied receivers? Quincy Porter is obviously at the very top of the board. He's the guy that they want as that big-bodied guy. And, Michigan, I think, is right up there with Ohio State, and a lot will be determined on his OVs. But I mean, he is the guy. On3 has him ranked as the number 31 overall recruit nationally, which puts him right in 5-star territory, which is where I have him. But a few other names to know: top 100 receiver Derek Meadows out of Bishop Gorman, which produced signee Micah Kaapana, just visited for the spring game, and Jacob Washington out of Louisiana is another big-bodied receiver that visited recently. Let's go down to Ralph Melvin, and he says, any news on Quincy Porter or any of the receivers? Nothing really new on Quincy. I mean, I just talked to him a couple of weeks ago, about a week after he made his visit for Michigan. And, Michigan still has the lead on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. I think this has become more of a Michigan-Ohio State battle with Penn State up there as well, and a few others. With Quincy, he told me that he plans to release, a top list soon, and it'll be a pretty short list. I think he wants to narrow it down to 5 and make a decision in July. So a lot will be determined on OVs. And, with other receivers, I mentioned some of the big bodies. Michigan obviously wants some speed as well. So Philip Wright is a name to know. He just visited for the spring game. He's a 3-star out of Louisiana. And Michigan's still in a good spot for Taz Williams out of Texas as well. The Wolverines have the On3 prediction machine lead with him too. Nate the Great says, hey, EJ, if we were to see a Marquise Davis, Jordan Marshall 1-2 punch in the backfield, how would they complement each other? Marshall seemed more like a power back. Davis seems to be more explosive. Yeah, exactly how you would think. I said on yesterday's show, I believe that, it could be your new a Jordan Marshall, Marquise Davis combination could be a new Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum combination, with Marshall playing the Corum role and Marquise Davis playing the Donovan role. Marshall is terrific between the tackles. He's going to move the chains. He's going to run people over. He's going to be exciting to watch in that sense. And Marquise is going to be exciting in a different sense, in that he has that home run ability. He has the playmaking ability. You can line him up in different spots in the offense and, watch him go. So Marquise is a dynamic player that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You get your popcorn ready to watch him. And Jordan Marshall is going to pick up first downs, move the chains, and, be a guy that can break off some long runs as well, similar to what Blake did. So, I know I'm super excited about Marquise Davis because of that home run ability, but, I'm also excited about Jordan Marshall because he can be the bell cow type that Blake Corum was. So, I think both of those guys complement each other really well and would be that dynamic duo. And for Tony Alford to go into Ohio and land a Marquise Davis, just a cycle after landing Jordan Marshall, would be absolutely fantastic for the Wolverines. Nate the Great says, I recently saw that Nathaniel Marshall is trying to recruit Marco Jones to be in the class. Does Michigan have a legit shot with him? Saw some of his highlights, and dude looked like Jadeveon Clowney. Yeah, Marco Jones has a really fun highlight reel. If you haven't watched it, it's hilarious. He plays middle linebacker for his high school, and he's just absolutely dominant. He's listed at 6'4", 215 pounds. He actually measured in at 6'5", 240 pounds. On his Michigan visit. And yes, the Wolverines have a legit shot here. He just released his top 10. Michigan was in it, and they hosted him for the spring game. I think he's going to narrow it down even further soon, and I would expect Michigan to get an official visit. So, we hadn't heard much buzz about Marco Jones in Michigan for like a year until this visit, but I think the Wolverines have cemented themselves as a contender coming out of this visit. And like I said, I do believe that he will return for an OV. I think Marco will have a nice little update soon. So there's a teaser for you. Go Blue 81 says, EJ, I believe you said the Marshall commit wasn't NIL related. So who would we have to get to let us know our NIL game is doing better? DJ Pickett, Chris Ewald, Khalil Lockett, just absolute big time guys at premium positions that have some of these NIL contenders really high on their list. I thought Nate Marshall was maybe an anomaly like Jordan Marshall was last cycle, in the sense that he does play a premium position. Pass rusher is a premium position as well as running back. And both of those guys obviously spurned potential upfront NIL opportunities to pick Michigan. So yeah, I still think Michigan has some work to do on the NIL front so they can continue to land prospects of the caliber of Jordan Marshall and Nate Marshall. But, I think Michigan did a great job of identifying Nate as a guy that would pass up on NIL, because I think some people, including myself, weren't too sure of that, especially since he had official visits scheduled with Alabama and Miami. I wasn't sold that he wasn't going to pass up the NIL opportunities. So, and that's what I mean. I've talked about it on previous videos. Michigan needs to find guys that are willing to do that. It's, there's only going to be a handful of guys in the top 100 that are going to, have the, foresight to see what they can make in the future at a place like Michigan, and also value all of the benefits off the field, like the education and just, on the field as well in terms of development. So I think, another guy that could fit that mold would be like Jadon Blair is someone that comes to mind immediately. That's a top 100 recruit that could pass up some NIL opportunities to come to Michigan. So, the Wolverines just have to keep finding those types of guys as they continue to figure out an NIL plan. Go Blue 81 says, also, how do we stand with Andrew Olesh? Andrew Olesh, top 100 tight end out of Pennsylvania. I think Michigan is in his top 2. Like I said earlier in the show, I don't think the Wolverines are going to land Hayden Bradley. I think Andrew Olesh is at the very top of the tight end board. He visited in the spring. Penn State has the lead on the On3 recruiting prediction machine, but the Wolverines are fighting hard there. Alabama also involved, but I would say he's leaning more towards Big Ten country, though I would never count out, the Southern powers in any recruitment. But I think Michigan's right up there with Penn State, but Penn State is going to be tough to beat. Let's go to Nate the Great. He says, I saw in a recruiting article that Kamar Archie and Mark Zachary didn't make it in for the spring game. Is Michigan losing ground there? I do think they're losing ground with Mark Zachary, I guess, if there was ground to be lost. I think Notre Dame's been the heavy favorite there for a while. And, Michigan's been the school that's been the biggest threat per se, but I think Notre Dame is far and away the leader there. He's still scheduled to come in for an official visit, but I'm not very optimistic. And Kamar Archie, he has some things going on. So, I had nothing to do football wise. I think he's still highly interested in Michigan, but I don't want to talk too much about that. Go Blue 81 says, which of the new staff have you heard is really killing it on the recruiting trail right now? And do you think hiring James Brown will help with your home state of Texas recruits? The guy that is killing it right now is Tony Alford, obviously, getting all these big time backs to visit, from Marquise Davis to Bo Jackson to Jordan Davison, and already getting the number one recruit in the running back recruit in the country on campus, and Savion Hyder. I mean, that's extremely impressive. He's been super active. He's been a big upgrade over Mike Hart, and he obviously has the Wolverines in a position to land Marquise as well. So Tony Alford definitely gets my vote, but I think Lou Esposito deserves some credit for coming in after Mike Elston departed, and then Greg Scruggs was here for a hot minute and got in trouble with the law. So, having Esposito come in right away and help land Nate Marshall and have the Wolverines back in the mix for Marco Jones, especially with Esposito not even having a Power 5 background or any relationships with these kids. Super impressive, the job that he's done in such a short time span. Forge Warner says, are Illinois and Tennessee two states that have much talent that we are gaining ground in? Michigan's always had a strong presence in Illinois. You look at the current roster. The roster recently, and you've had, JJ McCarthy and Tyler Morris, Jimmy Rolder, Trey Pierce, Marion Stewart. So, the state of Illinois, Chicagoland specifically, has been friendly. Remember, Sherrone was the area recruiter there before he became the head coach. So they're always going to have a strong presence there. Esposito has some ties as well. And obviously now you landed Nate Marshall. And Tennessee was more of a clink state. So I'm interested to see if Michigan continues to pull talent out of there. There is a lot of talent in Tennessee. Obviously, Michigan does have a commitment in Eli Owens out of Tennessee, though he's more in the Smoky Mountains region. The Nashville area obviously is talent rich, but, I think Michigan can continue to recruit that state well. It looks like we are past time and we still have some questions. So we're going to try to get through these quickly. Go Blue 81 says, don't want to be negative, but percentage we hold on to Marshall has taken our recruits in the past with huge NIL offers. And how are we with Jalen Williams? Yeah. I never put in a prediction for Nate Marshall, and I've seen people ask why on Twitter. Because I'm scared of Miami. Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, he committed. That's great. I'm excited, but I'm still scared of Miami because you never know when a recruitment can change. If you remember last cycle, there was a brief moment in time where it looked like Michigan would land Justin Scott, and then, he committed to Ohio State, and then he ended up flipping to Miami. Collins Anchiampong told me that he was sticking with Michigan, and less than 24 hours later, he flipped to Miami. So I will always be cautious. It's just kind of the era we live in, and it sucks. And, it seems like I'm negative too, but it is what it is. You have to be stupid to not consider that as a possibility. So, I think Michigan will have to keep fending off those schools, especially as we get into official visit season. But, I think Michigan views Nate as a guy that really values the culture and what Michigan has to offer on and off the field. And that's why he committed over having the opportunity to get some NIL up front at Miami. Juju says, I think Jair Hill was beating out Waller for cornerback 2, and it resulted in Waller's transfer. I think he hit the portal for depth now as well. Thoughts? Yeah, I don't really know what happened with that. I mean, it was a little surprising. I expected Jair Hill to win that. Jair was my highest graded recruit in that class. But I still think Waller could have had a role, especially with how much he was flashing. I wasn't super high on Waller as a recruit, and he was, a very pleasant surprise. Remember, he's a kid that really didn't have any other P5 offers except for Kentucky, and was a late addition by Clinkscale. He was way down on the board too. It wasn't like it was this great evaluation. Like, it was a panic take. Like, he was like plan F and he turned out to look the part. So, it's kind of surprising to see him transfer, because again, even if he wasn't going to beat out Jair, I felt like he could have had a role this season. Jack says Gash is a lock since he set his commitment date for May 3rd, right? I believe so. I am confident in my prediction. EJ, in your evaluation, rank Marquise Bowe and Davison. Marquise Bowe and Davison. I think Bowe and Davison are pretty interchangeable, but I've always had Marquise at the top of my board. Jameer Addison says, is Dominic Nichols good for a freshman? Yeah, man. I mean, you guys should know that I've been banging the Dominic Nichols drum forever. I called out on 3 and said that he shouldn't be a 3-star. I've always had him as a 4-star. I've always had him as a top 250 player is what I believe I graded him at. It might have been even a little bit higher than that. So I've always been a Dominic Nichols fan. Obviously, he flashed at the spring game, so I have high hopes for him. Enlay Wu says, does Carter Smith have the potential to become a 5-star eventually? I mean, if he keeps projecting well as a passer, the possibilities there, if people make it down to Fort Myers to see him play. The thing with Carter is he just doesn't do a lot of camps. He doesn't play travel 7-on-7. So people never really see him. But if you go watch him play on Friday nights, I think you'll be really impressed with him, especially if, again, he comes along as a passer, which you can see a huge difference from, November to now with his private quarterback coaching. Enlay Wu says, in your evaluation, who are the better corners? Galloway, Zachary, Kanoa, and Jadon. We seem to have realistic chances to land these. Well, they play different positions. Galloway and Zachary are corners. Kanoa Winston's more of a nickel safety, and Jadon's a safety all the way. I think overall the best recruit is Jadon, and I think Michigan values him as such. He is the highest ranked from the services as well. Just a big, long, athletic safety that can spin down and play some linebacker too, kind of like a Keon Sabb or Makari Page. There's a lot to like about Jadon Blair. Next, I think it's between Zachary and Kanoa Winston. I think Zachary is one of the better pure corners this cycle, though he is very thin. Kanoa gets knocked down a bit for being more of a nickel type, but he's a hell of a player. I would say Kanoa is a better player than Zachary. But I think we're kind of pigeonholing him as a nickel a little bit, which devalues his ranking. But he's still ranked super high. I mean, he's a top 100 guy too. And then Galloway would be last. He's super fast, but I just don't know if he's, an elite level player. And that goes back to like the original question. Like, you can't just judge off of track times all the time. Like there's guys that'll run blazing times that just don't have the proper technique at corner. And there's guys that run blazing times that can't run a route. So, with Galloway, I think there's just a lot of question marks that I would still have on him. Do we have a realistic shot at Trey McNutt, Andrew Olesh, Derek Meadows, and Andrew Marsh? I would bet if I were to set an over-under line for how many of these guys Michigan lands, it would be 0.5, because I don't think they land McNutt. I don't think they land Andrew Marsh. I don't think they land Derek Meadows. And right now, I don't think they land Andrew Olesh, but I think they have a legit shot. I know there's been some optimism around Andrew Marsh, but I just have a difficult time seeing that one. Derek Meadows, I'm not sure how much this visit really moved the needle for him. And Trey McNutt, I think there are some NIL heavy hitters with that one. Let's go down to Henry Kardorsky. He says, EJ, some time ago you wrote that DJ Pickett's recruitment wasn't NIL driven, but now only the deep pocket programs are on the race. Did his approach change, or was Klink better positioned for him? The loss of Klink definitely led to a loss of interest in Michigan. He had a really strong relationship with him. But I think the way this recruitment has really evolved, I'm not sure it would have made a difference had Klink stayed. Obviously he had a ton of ties to Michigan. His mom went to Michigan. He had relatives in the state. He had relatives that taught at the University of Michigan. So, there's just a lot of ties there, and it didn't work out. And this is a prime example of why we can't just, including myself, say a recruitment won't be NIL driven, because it could come back to bite us and things could change dramatically. I think NIL is here. It's here to stay, and recruitments are going to change on a dime. Kids that you maybe thought weren't NIL driven suddenly become NIL driven. And I was going to say, the guy that comes to mind that'll always hurt my soul is Aaron Childs. That one really broke my spirit. I got to know Aaron Childs so much throughout the process. The best kid ever, one of my favorite guys. And then just out of nowhere, Michigan had an entire plan for him to commit on ESPN like Jaden Davis. Out of nowhere, this man goes out, commits to Florida, never responds to me again. Like, that one really, really hurt. So I feel like ever since the Aaron Childs recruitment, I've just been completely scarred for life. So, so you always have to worry about NIL no matter who the kid is. Borge Warner says, who is looking exciting at linebacker that we have a chance with? Elijah Melendez and Kamar Archie are still the guys that are really high up there. Another prospect that Michigan really likes and values more than his 3-star ranking is Chase Taylor. Michigan's trying to make a move with top 100 linebacker Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. We'll see if things progress there. And those are kind of the names I think that come to mind from a linebacker perspective. I'm sure I missed a guy or two. Adam Shepardson says, why is Waller transferring? I don't have the exact answer. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but it looks like that's our last question, and we've gone completely over time. So appreciate you guys for joining us on tonight's show. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. We're always dropping new videos, and subscribe to the Wolverine for $1 for 2 months using the code UM1 exclusively for our YouTube members. Appreciate everybody that joined us. And Dutchman snuck in a question here. If JJ actually becomes a top 5 pick, why wouldn't Underwood give Michigan a second look? NIL. Good night.